Good evening, everyone, or is it afternoon? It seems like evening to me. My name is Esther Krofa, and this is Admas Kanyagya, and we just wanted to welcome you to the 4th Annual Black Policy Conference. We know that many of you have traveled from near and far, and we're just so grateful to have all of you here with us today. And we're really lucky to have the Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, Anthony Brown, joining us for our keynote speech. And following that, we'll have a reception upstairs in the Malkin Penthouse. But I just wanted to welcome you and thank you for coming. And also wanted to say a special thank you to IOP for putting this forum event together. Thank you so much. And before we get off the stage, I would like to introduce Dean McCarthy. He's played an integral part in organizing this conference and planning it alongside the both of us and our steering committee for the entire year. We could not have done this without him. And he will come up here and introduce Earl Adams. Thank you.
Those two women are fabulous. They have worked long and hard to bring this conference to be this year, like their predecessors, many of whom are here with us. My job, as usual, is functional. I'm going to act as the moderator for this evening's forum event. But before that, I get the pleasure of welcoming back to the Kennedy School very quickly. You know, at the forum, we introduce the introducer who introduces the next introducer. But it is my pleasure to welcome back to the Kennedy School my former advisee, Earl Adams. And Earl, it's fabulous to have you back here. He said he feels like he's attending his own wake. So many people have heard about him from me since he's been. But Earl is part of the great Kennedy School Morehouse College connection. He got an MPP, Master's in Public Policy degree here. Meanwhile, at the same time, somehow he was managing to get a concurrent degree at America's leading Catholic university, Boston College, in case you were in doubt. And he went off to practice law with a big law firm in Washington, D.C., but after a couple of years, decided that public service was really what he was all about. He's a great role model for our students here, and so he went on to become the Chief of Staff for Lieutenant Governor Brown, who we are very honored to have with us today. Without further ado, I promise, Earl, welcome back to the Kennedy School. He will say a few words of introduction. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Dean McCarthy, for that kind introduction. I'm very happy to be here this evening as part of the 4th Annual KSG Black Policy Conference. First, I'd like to congratulate the organizers of this event. As I told them that when I was a student here, we tried to put on a conference like this, but we're not successful. And I'm very happy to see that they have been successful and that this is the 4th year now that this conference has been happening. I know they'll be happy when it is over. I did hear that for the second year students that the PAEs are done, so I guess the only thing you have to look forward to now is finals. But congratulations again. It is truly an honor for me to stand here this evening. As any Kennedy School alum and probably alum from the college will say, that to present here at the forum is perhaps one of the most significant events in their lives. Although I'm not giving my own piece of scholarly work tonight, it is still an honor for me to be here because I have the chance to introduce to you a very distinguished individual who happens to be my boss and my friend. Lieutenant Governor Anthony G. Brown has had a notable public service career to both his community and the state of Maryland and across the nation. Prior to his election as the 8th Lieutenant Governor of the state of Maryland, Anthony was a member of the Maryland House of Delegates, where he rose very rapidly and was eventually appointed the Majority Whip. He became a respected voice of leadership on veterans affairs, health care, foster care and adoption, higher ed, and economic development. He has continued this commitment to those areas, serving as the Lieutenant Governor, where he's established a full partnership with KSG favorite Governor Martin O'Malley. A 1984 graduate of Harvard College, Anthony's commitment to public service inspired him to join the Army ROTC. Upon graduating, he was commissioned a second lieutenant in the United States Army, serving a tour of duty in Germany as a helicopter pilot with the 4th Combat Aviation Brigade, 3rd Infantry Division. After serving 5 years on active duty, he returned to Harvard to attend the law school, where he graduated in 1994. Though his legal career was relatively short, it was yet still very memorable. Working as an associate with what is now WilmerHale in Washington, D.C., in addition to his billable work, he also distinguished himself through the pro bono work that he did for the needy throughout the Washington region. In 2005, while serving his second term as in the Maryland State General Assembly, Anthony deployed with the 353rd Civil Affairs Command in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He served with distinction in Baghdad, Fallujah, Kirkuk, Basra, and currently still serves our country in the United States Army Reserves. In December 2007, he was promoted to the rank of colonel, and he commands currently the 153rd Legal Support Organization. I'm going to steal a little bit of his intro this evening and just tell you that notwithstanding his very distinguished career and background, his proudest accomplishments are actually his two children, Rebecca and Jonathan. Working with Anthony Brown and Martin O'Malley to make progress for Marylanders has been an honor over the past 17 months. Thus, it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce to you this evening the Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, the Honorable Anthony G. Brown.
Thank you very much, Earl. Earl's been working, we've been working together for 15 months, and this is the first time he's had an opportunity to introduce me. We had to come all the way up to Cambridge to make that happen. So, but I really appreciate Earl's work in our office. And I remember when I was looking for a deputy chief of staff, and I called one of the local civic activists, and he mentioned Earl Adams. I hadn't heard of Earl Adams, and he said, "Tell me a little bit about him." He said, "Kennedy School graduate." I said, "Enough, stop, he's hired, sight unseen. I know the work product." But it's been a real pleasure, and thank you, Earl, for that kind introduction. And Earl is right. In the 15 months as Maryland's Lieutenant Governor, as I've been introduced in so many different venues, the three things that I'm certainly most proud of, not necessarily that I've accomplished, but I've had an opportunity to be a part of, are my family, my wife, Pat, who I met 17 years ago at Harvard Law School. We were in family law together. She took all the notes. I had all the jokes. Also, my military service, which started here at Harvard when I was resident at Quincy House, and I attended the MIT ROTC program, and my 7 years here at Harvard in total. And this is a wonderful university and a source of so many talented and creative leaders in our country. I want to thank Esther and Admas for your work in bringing together this conference to discuss some very important issues and giving me an opportunity and the incentive to return to Cambridge, to Harvard, and this beautiful campus. Thank you, Dean McCarthy, for your leadership here at the Kennedy School and for producing outstanding graduates. And I want to thank each and every one of you here in attendance this evening, and for those of you who are participating in this year's fourth Black Policy Conference. I must say, by way of footnote, that I was very shocked to hear that it's only the fourth. I think they're probably doing the 44th up at the law school, but keep at it, and you'll be there in no time. This evening, I'd like to speak to the conference theme, how making a difference works, approaches to real solutions, and I'd also like to share with you a little of the Maryland experience in certain issue areas that are of importance to the African American community. Somewhere embedded in that theme is the belief that there is a need for change in the world, the belief that our community and our world cannot simply remain as they are, the belief that tomorrow we need to be in a different place than where we are today. And within that theme also lies a basic question: how do we make a difference? How do we bring about change? Likewise, this theme suggests an answer through practical solutions, specific programs, initiatives, campaigns, and quantifiable steps, big and small. All of these, I would submit, are what we can consider to be incremental progress towards profound, lasting, or transformational change in our world. This weekend, during your conference, as you look at the work being done around the country and the world in reshaping Black communities, as you look at the work being done to improve the welfare and quality of life for Black people, you will no doubt hear from practitioners who are making a difference, who are creating positive change, often inch by inch, mile by mile, day by day, and less frequently by one giant leap for mankind. Dr. Marion Wright Edelman once said, "We must not, in trying to think about how we can make a big difference, ignore the small daily differences that we can make, which over time add up to big differences that we often cannot foresee. And while your study and work here at the Kennedy School is designed in large part to equip you to foresee and even shape the big differences, the big goals, the transformational change in the world, you should be equally ready, willing, and able to design and promote and engage in the particularized requirements associated with incremental progress. It's timely that we come together this weekend under the theme of how making a difference works during the month in which we remember the 40th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King, who was an American visionary who inspired the country towards transformational change and who, during and at the time of his death, turned hard in the direction of calling for practical solutions to address the issues of poverty, not only in the black community, but in all communities throughout the nation. 40 years later, the challenges of our times continue to call out for transformational change. Our times require us to articulate and pursue big goals. Big goals such as securing the right to health care for all. Big ideas such as establishing a system of public education in which all children can fulfill their potential and attain high levels of achievement. Big goals like ensuring broad access to affordable neighborhoods that are connected to opportunity and accessing good jobs, wealth, and economic prosperity. And if these goals sound familiar to you, it's because you've read the covenant with Black America. And these are all laudable, lofty goals, transformative in nature, all achievable, yet require a bit of oxymoronic ambition, practical idealism, ideology built around consensus, and a patient urgency. The enthusiasm to make big gains through small steps, to solve big problems with manageable, seemingly small solutions, to make incremental progress. The concept of incrementalism has been misinterpreted by some to mean that we are happy with the status quo, or that we cannot change the world because the world has already changed us. I don't believe that. I believe that our constant incremental progress, incremental meaningful action leaves no issue or no problem too big to tackle, and I think that's what this conference is all about. And that's where I'd like to begin as I share with you briefly the Maryland experience. I see from your schedule tomorrow that you're going to discuss a number of problems or challenges facing communities within the African diaspora: wealth building, health outcomes, educational reform. These challenges are not unique to black communities, nor are they white problems. They're American challenges, and for that matter, they are challenges that people around the world face, from Iraq to South Africa to Germany, China, and Jamaica. Yet they are challenges that are manifested differently in different communities. They're problems that do offer a unique challenge within the African American community. They're problems that represent society's continuing struggle toward equality, opportunity, and inclusion. Take health care. Black infants are 2.5 times more likely to die before their first birthday than white infants. African Americans make up more than half of the new HIV/AIDS infection every year, but we're only 13% of the population. Black Americans are 1.5 times more likely not to have a regular doctor than white Americans. Consider the spatial disconnect between communities and opportunity. 3 out of 4 welfare recipients live in inner cities or rural communities, yet 2 out of 3 jobs created in America today are in the suburbs. 1 out of 4 black families does not own a car, yet only 12% of the federal transportation budget is allocated to public transportation. Even during our current housing crisis, more Americans own homes today than we did 15 years ago, yet fewer than half of all black Americans own a home compared to 3 out of 4 white Americans. On education, white students outscore black students by significant margins in reading. Nearly half of all black adults score in the bottom levels of adult literacy compared to 14% of white adults. Young black adults are twice as likely not to have a high school diploma or GED. And while 1 out of 3 black students go on to college, a figure that has gone up and we have much to be proud of with each generation of African Americans, black men are still vastly underrepresented on college campuses across the country. Governor O'Malley and I, and Governor O'Malley is no stranger of the Kennedy School of Government, we've set big goals for Maryland to address the challenges that we face. We set broad goals that reflect the values of all Marylanders, not just the black community within our state. Goals to strengthen and grow our middle class and support small, family, and minority-owned businesses. Goals to improve public safety, public education, and public health in every community. Goals to expand opportunity to more Marylanders, opportunities to learn, opportunities to earn, opportunities to enjoy the health of one another and the health of our environment. In my experience, I've observed that the big issues facing the African American community are manageable through linkages or association with broader issues facing the larger community. Broader goals articulated for all communities within this jurisdiction of governance, whether it's a state, whether it's a county, whether it's a city, and regardless of race, ethnicity, or religion. In Maryland, and I know there are a few of you that have lived in Maryland, and after I say what I'm about to say, I think a lot of you are going to want to come to Maryland, particularly when you move to Washington, D.C. to work in government or in the nonprofit sector. But we're proud of our successes. We're one of, if not the wealthiest state in the nation. Our workforce is one of the best educated in America. Our public school system is ranked third best in the nation and still improving. We have the most diverse business community in America. 16% of our firms in Maryland are majority owned by African Americans, and over half of the 400,000 small businesses in Maryland are owned by women or people of color. But there are still dichotomies in our state that cry out for solutions. Dichotomies where the divide falls disproportionately along racial lines. Despite being one of the best educated states in America, 600,000 Marylanders lack a high school diploma. Despite our strong schools, 1 out of 5 Marylanders in the workforce are still functionally illiterate. And despite the world-renowned hospitals and medical programs in our state, 800,000 Marylanders live each and every day without health insurance. So we search for practical solutions based on our shared values to address these disparities, with the understanding that the problems we face are not unique to any one community, any one subset of our population, or any one interest. On health care, I mentioned 800,000 Marylanders who live every day without health insurance. Far too many in Baltimore City, Prince George's County, the Eastern Shore, and other rural communities where the vast majority of African Americans live. And within this context of uninsured and underinsured, there are disparities in health outcomes. So we seek universal health coverage, as do many states. We do it without the benefit of cooperation or help from the federal government. And while that is our end goal, we see the incremental progress that is possible and present along the way, progress through practical solutions like expanding S-CHIP. In Maryland, we're one of only 4 states that provides coverage for children up to 300% of the federal poverty level. And we spend, thanks to many of your states, 2.5 times what the federal government allocates us because we draw from funds not used by other states. We've established school-based health centers in those schools that experience a high percentage of students on free and reduced lunch. And we provide primary adult care to low-income adults for preventive-type office visits, recognizing that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Last year, we passed the Health Care Reform Initiative that will cover 100,000 uninsured Marylanders by expanding Medicaid services, and for the first time in Maryland, through small business tax incentives. And when you take into consideration what I was saying before, that we've got 16% of our small firms are African-American owned, 400,000 of the small businesses, 50% owned by women and African-Americans. When you make those investments in small businesses through tax incentives to expand health care, that's going to make a big difference in communities of color. There are incremental steps, yet significant, towards universal coverage. And to specifically address disparities in health outcomes, we've taken several approaches. We've dispatched experts from our Department of Health to work with health professionals and students and other stakeholders about the advantages of cultural competency and a diversified workforce in the health and allied health professions. We've allocated a significant portion of Maryland Cigarette Restitution Fund to eliminate targeted disparities in minority communities. I've got a lot of figures here. I won't read them to you. Suffice it to say that in all of the major chronic illness categories, whether it's cancer, heart disease, stroke, diabetes, HIV, AIDS, we have seen in the last 7 years double-digit percentage drops in the deaths in the African American community attributable to those diseases, and we have seen a double-digit percentage narrowing of the disparity between black communities and white communities in those chronic areas, all but cancer, which is only 5%. We know that our strongest weapon in this battle is greater health coverage. Still, we know that our progress is possible because of the practical initiatives, programs, and campaigns that enable us to make incremental progress on a daily basis. Connecting communities. Last week, Eugene Robinson, a Washington Post columnist, wrote a piece on the 40th anniversary of Dr. King's death, and he wrote, 40 years after Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, we sometimes talk about race in America as if nothing has changed. The truth is that everything has changed, mostly for the better, and that if we're going to see King's dream fulfilled, first we have to acknowledge that this is not an America he would have recognized. Since Dr. King's violent murder in Memphis 40 years ago, the black community has seen its poverty rate cut nearly in half. Black Americans wield $800 billion of consumer spending power. Some would argue we spend too much, but the dollars amount is pretty high, which would amount to making black America the 15th or 16th wealthiest nation in the world if we were a separate nation. 40 years ago, 2 out of 100 African Americans earned today's equivalent of $100,000 a year. Today, that number is 1 in 10. We have made progress, but there are still disconnects between communities of color and the types of opportunities that sprout wealth. Corporate, personal, and community wealth in Maryland is no different. Prince George's County, where I live, wealthiest majority black county in America. We also have the second highest unemployment rate in Maryland. Baltimore City sits at the focal point of our technology triangle in Maryland, but certain neighborhoods are still marred by boarded windows, abandoned properties, and street corner commerce. But there are steps that we as policymakers can take to connect communities with opportunities, steps that we are taking in Maryland. We embrace inclusionary zoning practices based on the model in Montgomery County, Maryland, that provide lower income families with the benefit of affordable housing in opportunity-rich neighborhoods. We support public and mass transit. We're investing $100 million this year on a light rail connection between workers and communities in Prince George's County and jobs in Montgomery County. We're going to invest $1.4 billion between now and 2015 to connect Baltimore with job opportunities north and south of Baltimore, opportunities coming to Maryland as a result of base realignment and closure. And we've made a staunch commitment to encourage home ownership, which today includes a commitment to stand with people against foreclosure. And Maryland recently enacted what the Washington Post characterizes as the most sweeping measures to protect homeowners from foreclosure. While there's not specific data, we've seen anecdotal evidence that connecting people and communities with opportunities is a small step toward gaining wealth, stability, and promise for a brighter tomorrow. People are moving back to Baltimore after 2 or 3 generations of population decline. Minority and women-owned businesses are growing every day, and new wealth is being shared in black and in white and in all communities as rail, bus, and other transit options create new urban walkable centers in otherwise suburban settings. We're making strides towards lasting, permanent, positive change. Education, more than connecting communities to opportunities, we also need to we see the need to bring opportunities to these communities. And that starts with public investments in the public institutions within those communities, the schools, the libraries, and the other educational institutions that develop human potential. The institutions that set at their goals the elimination of performance gaps, the improvement of graduation rates, and the achievement of greater all-around success. In Maryland, we understand that success does not come cheap, and it doesn't come simply from our desire to make change. Since 2002, in a state budget of about $13 billion, we're spending $1.9 billion more today than we did in 2002 for K through 12 education. We put quality and accountability standards in place well before and far more successfully than the federal government, No Child Left Behind. We instituted all-day kindergarten, and we boast one of the top 10 pre-K programs in the country for low-income families. We embrace partnerships with Teach for America. You're going to hear from them tomorrow. The Bell Foundation, started by Earl Phelan, my classmate at Harvard Law School, with the College Board and local businesses to enhance educational opportunities for all students. And we've seen the fruits of our investment. Since that major investment that I mentioned in 2002, we've seen reading and math scores go up in every jurisdiction in Maryland in every grade level. Maryland leads the country in AP participation. We're the second in AP performance. Graduation rates are increasing. There are no less than 3 Maryland high schools that are among the top 100 public high schools in the country. We've also made incredible strides in narrowing the performance gap between black and white students. In the past 7 years, third grade math scores for African Americans improved 40%, and we've cut by a third the performance gap. Eighth grade reading scores up 30%, cut the performance gap by 15%. More black students are taking the SAT, and where we often see an increase in SAT participation, we often see a decline in scores, not in Maryland. Increase in participation, increase in scores. And the dropout rate is dropping across the state nowhere faster than in the black community. In the last 7 years, we've reduced by 30% the dropout rate in the number of African American students that drop out before graduation. Our work isn't done. These gaps aren't closing nearly fast enough, but we should be, and we are proud of the incremental progress that we're making toward profound, lasting, transformational change in Maryland. Change that is made possible, I believe, only within the context of bigger goals that are shared by all Marylanders. Let me conclude my remarks by referencing Michael Hayes, a professor at Colgate University, who has examined the role of incremental progress in our world. He spent a great deal of time looking at both successful and failed efforts to develop or implement far-reaching policy, and he arrived at a simple conclusion. Progress requires negotiation and compromise, but it also requires leaders and policymakers who possess the ability to think big. And big change is most likely to occur, says Professor Hayes, through a series of smaller steps, practical, day-to-day solutions. And I think that's what this conference is about. So, particularly to the students, it falls upon you as tomorrow's policy leaders, activists, and public servants, whether you're in the private sector or the public sector, to step onto the roads of incremental change. Don't be afraid of it, embrace it. You can make your distinct and unique contributions in your area of interest and expertise. And you've got to bring real ideas and real vision to the table. That's your task. You have the benefit of attending an outstanding school of government surrounded by the best and the brightest, and you're undoubtedly eager to make a difference in your community. The only advice that I'll give you, because this is not a commencement speech, is don't blow it. Thank you very much for allowing me to spend some time with you.
We'll do some Q&A.
Good, good. You want me to stand right here with you?
That's great. Any applause here? Thank you very much, Governor Brown. As is our custom, you're very familiar with it, having been on the Student Advisory Committee in the Institute of Politics when you were an undergraduate here. As is our custom in the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum, we will now take some questions. There are microphones on the floor on either side, and then microphones in the middle loges up above. When you approach to ask a question, please do identify yourself, and please also identify any affiliation you might have with the university. It is a time for questions, not for statements, as you know. And so if there are questioners or things that you want to know that were not touched upon by Lieutenant Governor Brown, this is your opportunity. Thank you. We'll begin over here and then to the lady. Yes.
Yes, sir. My name is Josh Stroman. I'm a senior political science history major at Benedict College in Columbia, South Carolina, but I would be attending the Divinity School here at Harvard in the fall. And my question is very brief. First, I want to thank you, Lieutenant Governor Brown, for coming to address the forum. But given the incredible amount of success that you have been able to experience in Maryland and your incredible attention to detail with the issues relevant to the residents of Maryland, what seems to be the problems in those inner cities such as Baltimore that you can't really put your hands around and, in regards to transferring opportunities to those people in those low-income communities who really need it the most?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I did have a piece in the remarks, which I deleted out because I travel as Maryland's promoter, but there was a section in there that, you know, while we are, you know, excited about the resources available in Maryland due to the incomes and wealth, we are the fourth most violent state in the country. The level of violence, particularly in Baltimore City and Prince George's County, black-on-black violence, we have not truly been able to get our hands around. I was proud and pleased to see last week in the Baltimore Sun, it did report that for the first quarter this year, we're at a 23-year record low, but low is not good enough. So one of the I think biggest impediments to attracting businesses to our local governments, Prince George County and Baltimore City. Prince George County, I mentioned, is the wealthiest majority African-American county in the country. And just as, you use different indicia of sort of like you kind of got there, you've arrived. We don't have a Nordstrom's. Why doesn't Nordstrom's come to Prince George's County? There's a perception of violence and crime that unfortunately plagues some of these areas. So, and unfortunately, the numbers support some of the conclusions, but we're working hard on that. So public safety is our biggest challenge, I think, in the African American community today in Maryland. It's not a popular thing to say when you're in Maryland.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Ann Manning. I'm a mid-career here at the Kennedy School. And as I've studied poverty over the year in more depth than I had in the past, I see how many of our policy proposals, they're so fragmented among education, healthcare, transportation, and it sounds like you're beginning to see a pattern of how to create a comprehensive plan. Could you talk a little bit about the political will necessary and how you create that across the state to actually address these in a more comprehensive way?
Sure. And let me start by picking up on that point about sort of organizing policy and strategy. I mentioned these broad goals that we have in Maryland. And we've also developed strategies within Maryland, which are sort of like interdisciplinary strategies. One we call workforce creation, which isn't just the economic developers and the MBE folks, but it includes our Secretary of Health. It includes our Secretary of the Department of Public Safety and Corrections, because there's a real workforce, potential workforce there, that if we retrain, provide treatment and rehabilitation, they're going to come into the workforce and they're going to be productive. Workforce creation is one of the strategies. Sustainability, how do you manage growth and development, environmental preservation and conservation, and then the other is security integration, which is everything from Homeland Security, juvenile services, and the like. So we have developed these strategies, these interdisciplinary strategies. The public will that we, and the goodwill that we enjoy in Maryland, I believe, is the result of Governor O'Malley's personal commitment to the principles of good government. As some of you may know, a few years ago, when he was mayor of Baltimore, and he instituted a city stat program of accountability in government, which received an award from the Kennedy School, and we've implemented that at the state level. We are a very transparent government. Often people measure government effectiveness by what you put into the budget, but really you ought to be looking at the outcomes that you get. So Governor O'Malley is not reluctant to show the good, the bad, and the ugly. And when you do that, there's a greater willingness by people, members of the General Assembly, who we have to rely on to partner up in implementing policy. Stakeholder groups have proven to be more willing to collaborate with us, even when some of the things that we propose are seemingly inconsistent with their immediate interests. We just raised about $1.2 billion worth of taxes in November. It's not an easy thing to do. Our poll numbers did go down. We expected that, and that's fine. But our our stakeholders, and I'm not just talking about the traditional sort of, we're Democrats, the, labor and the teachers union, but stakeholders across the board, even the chambers of commerce, many of them stuck with us, realizing that, hey, look, we understand the importance of what you're doing, we see what you're doing, you're including us in the conversation. So we were able to hold on to a lot of people. And once we weather this economic downturn, we might have a little bit more to show for it, but we're proud of the direction that we're moving.
Okay, let's go with this lady here.
Thank you. I am Avell Gordley, Oregon State Senator, and also Associate Professor, Department of Black Studies at Portland State University. I heard you say that you are experiencing success reducing the dropout rate. Can you talk about strategies that you are employing to get to that success?
Sure. There's several things we're doing. I'll just focus on one of them, and that's CTE, or Career Technology Education. Let me tell you, we talk a lot about going to college, and, we've been talking about that for decades, and it's a great thing to do, but you know what? A lot of our young people, they're not going to college. They're not going to college. They may pursue some post-secondary school education or training, but on the horizon for them is neither an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and certainly not a PhD. But what they are interested in and excited about, and what gets these young people coming to school every day, is this idea that I can develop a skill. I can be an HVAC operator. I may not be the PhD that maps the human genome, but I can actually do something productive in that biotech firm to earn a decent salary and feel good about what I'm doing. So we attribute a lot of our successes in the investments that we're making in career technology education.
Thank you. This gentleman was next. Chris, we won't forget about you up there.
Listen, like everyone else, I'd like to thank you for coming out. My name is Kenneth Perkins, and I'm a student in the Divinity School here. And I noticed in the handout that they gave us that you had a quote about saying that the Democratic Party is failing African Americans, and I'm guessing that you mean in Maryland. What are some of the areas that you think that the Democratic Party is failing African Americans, either within the state or within, I guess, the nation as a whole, perhaps? And what do you think are some of the ways that you can work toward, ameliorating some of those issues?
Sure, I think that quote, I didn't know that quote was in there. I think that quote actually goes back to 2002 from Maryland, I believe. And Maryland, 28% of the residents of Maryland are African American. We've got a growing Latino population, growing Asian population, and in 2002, we didn't have a single candidate of color on the statewide ticket of the Democratic candidates. I thought the Democratic Party was failing us. While we've been represented well in the state legislature, we were not particularly represented well throughout all of government. That's changed under Governor O'Malley. And quite frankly, it began to improve under Republican Governor Ehrlich. In 2002, I really thought the Democratic Party was failing. And the context of that quote was, the question was, did Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, who was running as the Democratic nominee for governor, did she fail the African-American community by not picking an African-American running mate for lieutenant governor? And it was easy to sort of finger her because she had a choice in who she could pick. That was the context, and my response was, no, it's not Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, it's the Democratic Party. That has since changed.
Chris?
Hi, sir. Chris Carter. I'm a native of Baltimore and a graduate of Kennedy School. Currently, I'm a consultant at Booz Allen Hamilton. And I'm actually working on a pro bono project. Actually, one of my colleagues, Christian, is here. Say hi, Christian. She's right there. And the project is with a client in Baltimore. And it's a drug rehabilitation and life counseling center in Baltimore. And I'm not going to give the name out. You probably know which one I'm talking about. But what we're essentially trying to do is determine if they should launch a social enterprise and some type of business that could help them generate funds for the organization because they're losing funds. So my question to you is, can you think of an example where the private sector has successfully formed and united with the public sector and particularly of an organization like this client, and where it's been successful and why?
I think our greatest success, and it may not be similar to the organization you're talking about, but I think our greatest success, and it may also go to the answer to the question of reducing that dropout rate, is in our business community in Maryland, stepping up and providing mentoring programs in our schools and internship opportunities. So I think that's probably the most successful public-private partnership that just immediately comes to mind. And I'm sure that, you know, with a little more thought and the bright lights not on, I might be able to come up with a few, but what's that?
They're even brighter for me, trust me.
Good evening. Thank you for coming, Lieutenant Governor Brown. I'm Michelle Wilson. I'm with the Environmental Protection Agency in Washington with the Intergovernmental Relations Program. And you were talking a lot about health issues. One of the major health issues among Black people and among people of color in general is environmental justice. One of the issues that we have, I'm from Baltimore also, is that everybody's father, grandfather, uncle, somebody worked at Bethlehem Steel at Sparrows Point, and people who live and work around these kinds of chemical toxins are exposed at a very high rate, and many of them are us. So what are the programs of Maryland, and what are your own ideas about environmental justice?
Sure.
Thank you.
The one area in Maryland where we're probably very aggressive, and I think we're achieving considerable success, is in the area of lead paint poisoning. And we're doing it on a variety of levels in terms of investments in abatement, exposing where necessary, manufacturers and landlords to civil litigation, health programs targeting the population, children primarily, who are being exposed, and the results have been very positive. We also, in our Office of the Attorney General, he has stood up I don't know if he's calling it an environmental justice unit, but a unit that looks at issues dealing with industrial hazards, environmental hazards. So the one area that I know that we're doing a pretty good job is in lead paint poisoning, and I'm not familiar with other areas where we may be making progress or where we may be falling short. But you're in the EPA, you're in Washington, and I'm sure you'll let us know. Please do. Please do. Help us prioritize. Yes.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Justin Steele. I'm a first year at Harvard Business School and pursuing a joint MPA degree here next year at the Kennedy School. One analogy that I've been sort of told for when you come into public office is like coming into a switchboard room. You have all of these levers in this switchboard room to sort of enact economic change and social change. And so you spend your first sort of year looking at these levers and thinking about pulling them and building up the courage, and you finally go to pull some of these levers, and they're not connected to anything. And I'm just curious, in your position, which levers have you found are actually connected to something and you have leverage to make change, and which of those levers might you have found in your position are not actually connected to something that's very frustrating and you're not able to make change?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Let me kind of build on that a little bit. And it's more than just walking into the room with all of these levers and trying to figure out which ones to pull and which ones are connected and which ones aren't connected. But a big part of that incremental progress and meaningful steps that one can and should consider taking for long-lasting change is getting the right people in the room with you to help you figure out which one of those levers are connected to something. And one of the things that you often see is you see African Americans on the Human Relations Commission. You see us on the Criminal Justice Commission. These are all important commissions and task force and boards, but you don't see enough of us on the Transportation Authority, on the Technology Board, on the Economic Development Commission. Because while you can set these lofty goals, and for example in Maryland we've set a goal of 25% MBE participation And in a state like Maryland, you'd think we'd be able to achieve it, but we don't. And that's because we don't have people in the room at all different levels of the operation with similar interests. It's not diverse enough, whether it's by race or talent or experience or ethnicity. So one of the first steps is to get the right people in the room to start pulling those levers. You know, I think maybe the way that we approach it is that there's a lot of activity in state government that is duplicative, that's redundant, and that, you know, we've just been doing it over and over and over again. And why is it 20 years later in, you know, and I'm sure that your states are similar, why is it that we still have a nursing shortage? We put money at it, we have scholarships for it, yet we still have a nursing shortage. One of the things that we've done with creating this strategy, and the one that I was talking about, workforce creation, is we're trying to align our educational institutions with our workforce training agency. We recently, this year, and it was a big political battle, and we barely had the political will to make it happen, we took adult education out of the Maryland State Department of Education, because they're good at educating children. They weren't so good at educating adults, pulling a lot of levers there and not really getting the results there. And we took it and we put it in the Department of Labor and with their workforce development and workforce training. So that may be one area where we constantly are going back and back, putting in money, putting in time, not really getting the results. So often it's a matter of just reconfiguring. So I think that might be close to what you're getting at in your question.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, hi. My name is Clarissa Quintanilla. I'll be a student at the Kennedy School here in September. And aside from the tax breaks to small businesses you mentioned before, what other strategies are you utilizing to encourage small business development in what you've termed the inner city?
Well, one of the things that we're doing, and that's a big one, I'll tell you, because when so I won't get away just that so quickly from our healthcare reform initiative, because when you talk to small businesses, they will tell you that, you know, their costs are going up, and probably their number one cost is healthcare. So when you hear presidential candidates talk about universal health coverage and reducing the cost of healthcare delivery as an economic issue, you talk to a small business owner, and that is absolutely true. So that does go a long way. In what we have done successfully, it started under then Mayor O'Malley and now Governor O'Malley, is we do have an aggressive minority and women business enterprise procurement program. And when Governor O'Malley became mayor of Baltimore, about 15% of the procurements went to MBEs. On the day he left, 36% went to MBE firms. And we're looking to do the same thing, giving opportunities to small businesses, disadvantaged businesses, to help them build capacity through government contracting, with the goal to, you know, be able to move on and graduate from the program and compete in a larger environment. So that's one of the things, the other things that we're doing. We have tried to, you know, streamline, take a close look through our Department of Labor, License and Regulation at all of the regulations that impact small businesses and try to eliminate those where necessary. Try to use technology in government so that where businesses are interacting with government, they can do it a little more efficiently and effectively. So those are some of the things that we're doing.
Thank you. I'll take the privilege of introducing the next questioner. This is Flash Wiley. For those of you who may not know him, he is a graduate of both the Kennedy School and the Harvard Law School, and the Air Force Academy as well. I won't leave them out. And has been a great friend of the Kennedy School and really the godfather of this Black Policy Conference in its 4th year, and we expect him to be here when we get to our 44th. Mr. Wiley.
You know, after an introduction like that, it puts a lot of pressure on you to ask an intelligent question. But the real pressure put on me was by this young lady up here who asked the question previously, because I'm a member of the business community, and I'm interested in how you view, not just as the Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, but also as a person who was a career public servant who has climbed the ladder and will continue to climb the ladder, I'm very sure, to even greater heights, how you view the business community, particularly the minority business community, as an ally in helping you achieve your public policy initiatives of inner city development.
Sure. First of all, I want to publicly thank Flash, who I reminded him earlier this evening, and he didn't recall, which may be an indication that it was a small amount, but he gave a contribution to my first political campaign about 10 years ago when I ran for the Maryland House of Delegates. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, manually inputting every Harvard graduate in the Black Alumni Directory, and I got about a 2% response rate. And that's right, and Flash was one of them, and so thank you very much. But certainly partners, and the governor and I meet regularly with various associations, the Minority Contractors Association, individual businessmen and women, minority businessmen and women, because we look to them to partner up with us in everything from improving our employment rate or reducing our unemployment rate, to delivering, and I know there's going to be, I think, a discussion sometime this weekend about the public value that private firms add, whether it's providing services in our correctional institutions, and looking to, quite frankly, often minority firms just kind of do it better and have a better understanding of the issues, closer to the pavement. A lot of it is communication and dialogue, and these are business people that up to now felt as if they weren't around the table in the discussion, and we like to think we've kind of opened the doors up, and so those are some of the things that we're doing.
Thank you. The Lieutenant Governor's been very generous. We're going to make this the last question.
Yes, Lieutenant Governor. The past Democratic administration in your state supported priority funding areas as a part of a comprehensive smart growth strategy. My name's Daniel Hutch. I work on smart growth issues for EPA, and I've had the benefit of being advised by Michelle Wilson as well. But you have the Chesapeake Bay and this unbridled growth in areas that really were not designated for the kind of public facility services. And so the idea is to stop this kind of cross-subsidization to areas in undeveloped areas and channel growth to existing communities. What is your idea of continuing this program, or what is your variant of smart growth?
Sure. Smart growth, just like Al Gore said that he invented the internet, Maryland, under Governor Glendening, invented smart growth. We are proud of smart growth and fully committed to it. Much of what I said in my remarks when I talked about connecting communities to opportunities, the only thing I didn't do was label it smart growth. The governor and I recognize that in the last 30 years in Maryland, while our population has grown about 30%, we've consumed 100% more in land, and at that rate, that's our biggest environmental challenge. Smart growth, I think, is an excellent example that illustrates the point I made earlier, that the interest in the African American community to be successful should be linked to the broader interests of the larger community. Smart growth was brought to us primarily by environmentalists, conservationists, those who had business interests in developing mass transit. And while all of those interests are promoted through smart growth, land conservation, agricultural preservation, as we channel development and redevelopment in those existing, what we call priority funding areas, that's great for the African American community as we connect our communities to job opportunities. This year, Governor O'Malley and I we promoted and we enacted with the General Assembly Transitory Development Program, where we're giving our state agencies, primarily the Department of Transportation, more tools to dispose of property in and around mass transit centers for development and redevelopment. We've created what I think is kind of significant legislation in the area of base realignment and closure, where Maryland is the largest BRAC mission growth state in the country, we created these BRAC zones where we provide additional state funding to local government when they make commitments to invest and reinvest in public infrastructure within a half-mile of mass transit centers, light rail, metro rail, bus depots, and airports. So we've embraced what Governor Glendening initiated about 10 years ago or so, and we're trying to take it to the next level.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure, yes indeed.
Again, thank you very much. Thank you for being with us here today. Thank you for your service to our country in the Army, and thank you for what you're doing for the great state of Maryland. My wife is from Bethesda. I'm going to talk to her about our moving back down there. It sounds so good. So this is a wonderful thing. I'd also like to, before inviting you all to the reception upstairs, recognize our friend Gary Flowers, an alumnus of the Institute of Politics, who was involved in starting this conference. Those only 4 years ago, but nonetheless, I think you were talking about it for a long time before that, and he runs the Black Leadership Foundation in Washington, D.C. Now, on behalf of Esther and Admas, I would like to ask you to join us all for a reception in the Kennedy School penthouse, which, if you know how to get there, you're on your own. If you don't, follow the people who do. And there's an elevator around the corner here that just press P and it'll take you up to the penthouse. Again, a round of applause for the Lieutenant Governor, who's done a fabulous job. Thank you, sir. Fabulous.